Please be seated. A Survival Guide to Pride by Reggie Mathalone. If, like me, you decide to backpack through the gay safari, here are some words to live by. Never, and I mean never, be the only person with a purse at a gay pride parade. After throwing all their belongings into it, your friends will begin tossing into your bag all of the free lube packs, condoms, and beads that come their way. They will not stop until your purse has become some sort of perverted Japanese vending machine, dispensing an overflow of rainbow-colored artifacts as you walk. So there I was, not an hour into the parade, carving my way through the masses, leaving behind me a trail of rainbow beads and plastic phalluses like a drunk, queer Hansel and Gretel. I had lost my friends, but I had gained some Jello shots and enough condoms to stock a Planned Parenthood for months. I had, in the chaos of the parade's crowds, somehow befriended a small group of lesbian anarchists. Always befriend the lesbian anarchists, as a rule. Barbara, who was, as far as I could tell, their leader, forged a course through the swarms of tourists by swinging her bra like a pendulum around her head and shrieking. I began my drunken pilgrimage to the other side of the parade. It was simply not acceptable to watch the parade idly from one position. I believed that I had to make a Hajj to visit the great temple of forgotten Mardi Gras beads and discount contraceptives. I believed in a spiritual process. This was my manifest destiny, my semen to shining semen. Let's back it up a little bit. The Houston Pride Parade began in 1979, in observance of the Stonewall Raid in Greenwich Village in 1969, in honor of our brave GLBT relatives who fought and fight and march tirelessly to earn basic civil rights and conquer tired and destructive stereotypes. Parades around the country and around the world were created. I concentrated on this as I stood watching the first few floats pass and allowed Julio, a float dancer, to shower me with lube and styrofoam penises. Pride. I waved my new styrofoam dick around and tongued a purple Jello shot out of its crinkled plastic container before beginning my long journey down Westheimer. The next hour was a blur. I passed a district of eager but politically ambiguous straight people, the shirtless old guys that sit in the lawn chairs they brought from home, a drag queen that oddly knew my first and last name but hated me, the Leathers, the Pleathers, and the genderless burlesque troupe, and Patsy from Absolutely Fabulous. Or had that been the Bears, Honey Badgers, the Silver Otters, the Cubs, the Gabies, and the Circuit Queens, the Chubs, the Twinks, and the Gipsters, the Daddy, the Wolf, and the Wardrobe. An overly highlighted queen with social anxiety, the Twunks. Anyway. You know how you can tell how old a tree is by counting the rings inside the trunk? The same approach can be applied to a person at Pride and the number of plastic beads they wear. I counted mine. 47 plastic necklaces adorned my neck and arms. I was undeniably the colossal redwood of this queer forest. I hadn't made it to the end of the parade route, but I felt a keen sense of accomplishment anyway. The parade had ended, and our beautiful city began to dismantle. Not its infrastructure, at first, but the people who made it so vibrant. They began dispersing. I hugged Barbara, the leader of the lesbian anarchists. She put her palm to my cheek and looked at me sincerely. I felt the beginnings of a tear form in the corner of my eye. The other anarchists gave me warm smiles and bid me farewell. I turned to leave. I was never very good at goodbyes. But Barbara grabbed my shoulder. "Wait!" she said. I turned back towards her. "What is it?" I asked. "I think I left my keys in your condom man purse." She was right. The parade had come and gone, and I had lived to tell the tale. It was a few weeks later, and I was getting ready for my first day of a marketing class I had signed up for. I was already kind of late, so I grabbed a bag from my closet, threw my books and laptop in it, and left for school. As I was walking from the parking lot to class, I realized which bag I had picked up. It was the bag. The bag full of God knows what kind of free Pride merchandise. Upon closer inspection and in the daylight, I also realized it was completely covered in glitter. Not a big deal, I thought. This is okay, I thought. I was 5 minutes late when I walked into the class. Every seat but one, right at the front, was taken, and the professor was already talking to the class. I closed the door cautiously, trying my hardest to evoke some sense of respect for the class. As I turned to walk to my desk, my foot caught on a wire from the wall to the projector at the front of the room. I tripped. Try as I did, I lost grip of my glittered bag and it took flight. It flew a foot or two and landed right in front of the podium, which behind my new professor spoke. Her charming facial expression slowly turned to confusion, and then very suddenly to horror, as hundreds of individual condoms littered her professorial stage. Then came the penises. Why were there so many penises? This moment lasted an impossibly long time. I could see every student in class processing the information that was being displayed in front of them in different ways. I saw, in the same moment, the sheer quantity of strange gay paraphernalia. How could it possibly be this much? My bag was like a sexually deviant clown car of impossible expanse and endless reservoir of shame. I cannot accurately convey to you how silent that room was as I emerged from that pile of condoms. This was the sound of nothing. The sound that existed before the Big Bang was this sound. I brushed off my shirt and continued to the professor and gave her a little nod, which was not returned. I can't remember if I cleaned up that pile of foam penises and plastic before sitting down, or if I just went straight to my seat. But I can tell you that I did not run with my tail between my legs. I had traveled the vast reaches of the Pride Parade, and I had become a stronger man because of it. Thank you.
It's like this story was written for me. I have a bad habit of vomiting in inappropriate times and places. When I was younger, I used to think that everyone experienced this kind of inconvenient vomiting, but as I've grown older, I realize more and more that my case may be unusual. The first of my memorable and embarrassing vomit experiences happened on the bus in the 6th grade. My stomach was feeling uneasy in the morning, but even at 11, I was used to a kind of regular sort of morning sickness without the pregnancy thing for at least the first couple of hours of the day. I had had a Pop-Tart for breakfast, s'mores flavor, before getting on the bus to school. In the first few months of the school year, I'd made a bus friendship with an 8th grader, Angelica. Being of the youngest grade level in the school, having an 8th grade friend, even if it was only on the bus, made me instantly more cool, mature, and hopefully envied by all the other 6th graders on the bus. This morning, Angelica was talking about some 8th grade test that she had that day. I was trying to play it cool despite my nausea until I felt the queasiness in my stomach rise up to my throat. My mind started racing as I thought of what to do. Should I stand up and run to the front of the bus? Do I have time to pull the bus window down? If I threw up in the aisle, how many rows would be blocked? Will Angelica stop talking to me if I throw up on the bus? Could I still pull off my cool factor without Angelica's friendship? If I throw up, will the school let me go home? Will my mom be mad if I throw up on my clothes? Will she make me do all the laundry to wash it off? Will s'mores Pop-Tart taste as good coming up as it did going down? But it was too late, and I couldn't think of anything to do but grab the nearest vessel to catch the pile of half-digested s'more Pop-Tart. Unfortunately, that vessel was Angelica's backpack, which she had open while she was studying for her test. We rode uncomfortably the rest of the way to school, where I retreated to the nurse's office to go home for the day. I begged my parents to buy a new pink JanSport backpack so that I could replace Angelica's that I had ruined. Handing the new backpack to Angelica was perhaps the last interaction we ever had. And it was the end of my cool streak on the bus. In the years that followed, I had some notable but mostly normal-seeming vomit experiences, such as being hospitaled in Thailand for dehydration after food poisoning, or spending most of my scuba certification in Grand Cayman throwing up over the side of the boat. I guess there was also that time that I threw up in my napkin during a dinner at Ninfa's while taking one too many tequila shots and then laughing too hard at a joke. I mean, who hadn't done that? None of these experiences really embarrassed me the way the bus incident had, though. And it wasn't until 16 years later that I had my next worst inappropriate vomit experience. This particular vomit incident happened after a work happy hour at Okra Charity Bar, when only 2 hours in, my boyfriend of 3 years called to tell me that he'd been accepted into a PhD program in Pittsburgh and he was planning to accept. Yeah. He would meet me back at the house later. He just wanted to share the good news with me. So I finished my Moscow Mule as a wave of sadness washed over me. I knew I wasn't moving to Pittsburgh with him, and this phone call meant our relationship was, essentially over. I didn't want my coworkers to see me cry, so I finished my drink and I left the bar. As I was driving home, blasting sad love songs and shouting along in an attempt to feel anger instead of sadness, I felt the same quick nausea bubbling up my throat. Again, 1 million thoughts raced through my head. Isn't the ginger in a Moscow Mule supposed to make your stomach feel better? How long is it going to take to drive the remaining 2 miles home? Should I pull over? Where would I throw up if I did pull over? What are the chances a cop would see me throwing up out of the passenger seat? Would they believe I had only had 3 drinks? Would I pass a breathalyzer if they asked me if they took my BAC? How much would it cost to clean the car if I just threw up in my lap? Is this shirt dry clean only? If I throw up, will I have to go to work tomorrow? Will a Moscow Mule taste as good coming up as it did going down? As these thoughts were running through my mind, I was running out of time. Then I saw it, the perfect vessel. I grabbed my lunchbox with my right hand, and holding the steering wheel with the other, I started tossing out the empty Rubbermaid containers from inside onto the floorboard, just in time for my lunchbox to catch the Moscow Mule liquid that escaped from my mouth. Yeah. I was only a few blocks from my house at that moment, and I was planning on how I would sneak in unnoticed by my 3 roommates and my 4 neighbors. At that same moment, all the tears I had been holding just sort of burst out. After parking, I opened the back gate to see the 4 neighbors and my boyfriend hanging out in the backyard while I was sobbing and holding this lunchbox full of Moscow Mule flavored vomit. And I just kept crying and holding the vomit lunchbox as they walked me upstairs and put me in bed. This time I didn't have to ask anyone to buy me a replacement lunchbox, as I could just order another one online. I did shortly after that have my last interaction with my then boyfriend, though. I think that what made these 2 particular experiences stand out to me the most was the extreme loss of pride that came along with choosing an inappropriate vomit receptacle in front of people whose opinion I really valued. Though I now fully realize that my vomit stories are more unusual than most, I have gotten used to finding ways to minimize the impact. And along the way, I've learned one very valuable lesson. S'mores Pop-Tarts and Moscow Mules do taste better coming up than they do going down. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. It's normal to wonder why you do the things you do. I'm sitting in the waiting room of a psychiatrist's office as I read this line in my journal. Who am I trying to convince? I slowly and with great precision turn to the next page. Otherwise, I hold myself very still, as if I were a cup of hot tea filled to the brim. One jostle, one unexpected movement, and I might erupt and overflow, scalding everything in my path in a volcanic rush. This was not my first time in a psychiatrist's office. Depression has been a frequent visitor in my life since I was a child, and it can be hard not to welcome him in with the familiarity of an old friend. Let's call him Fred. Fred will show up on a semi-regular basis, unannounced and uninvited. He'll say, "Hey, I have a great idea. Let's stop talking to our friends and family and fuck up our sleep schedules and become miserable wretches who feel nothing at all." Won't that be fun? "So you're staying a while then?" I'll respond, and Fred will barge right in, his not inconsiderable baggage in tow. Shrinks and their magic little pads of happy pills had been called in on more than one occasion to evict Fred, that stubborn little bastard. However, Fred, I knew. I could deal with him. This was not Fred. This was some next level shit. It had started off so wonderfully, too. I had kicked Fred out about 6 months earlier, and it was like my life had become this stereotypical movie montage where the overweight heroine starts turning her life around. I was overflowing with both ideas and enthusiasm. I was sleeping normal hours, losing weight, getting things done around the house. Colors seemed brighter and more vivid. Food tasted better. And I was happy all the freaking time. That should have been my first warning. The transition from everything is awesome to something might be wrong was so subtle that I missed it for months. I was the proverbial frog in the cooking pot, happily enjoying this lovely jacuzzi while the temperature gradually crept up. I remember thinking to myself at one point, man, is this what normal people feel like all the time? It turns out no. Apparently, normal people do not rack up 20 grand in credit card debt in the space of 4 months. Normal people do not take home people they meet in bars every night for 2 weeks. Normal people do not stay up for 3 days straight despite smoking a fuck ton of weed because they just don't feel tired anymore. Normal people do not spend 5 hours driving all over Houston in search of the perfect pen because if I could just get the right pen with the right color and the perfect flow of ink, then everything would be okay because I could quiet the bedlam in my own head by purging it onto a piece of paper. It was this last bit that finally got me in that waiting room. Insomnia and spending money I don't have and hooking up with random fuckboys were not exactly unexplored behaviors for me. But this constant onslaught of thoughts that I could not control and could no longer make sense of, that scared the shit out of me. I was drowning in a hell that was my own head, and I had no idea what the fuck was going on. I looked back down at my journal, to the desperate handwriting in all caps that had finally prompted a phone call to my company's employee assistance program. Stop bombarding people with ideas. Do not let everyone know. Seek professional help. Miss Schindler, Dr. Ostrin will see you now. With measured, deliberate movements, I gathered my belongings, including the 4 bulging moleskin journals I had filled in the last 2 weeks, and carefully made my way into the therapist's office. The doors closed behind me, and the dam burst. I don't know what's going on, and I'm really scared, and I'm having all of these thoughts, and they just won't stop. They won't leave me alone, and I think it might be ADD because I don't know what else would explain it, and I keep trying to get them out of my head, but then there are just more of them, so I write them down, and they keep multiplying, and I don't have enough pens, and there isn't enough paper, and my head hurts from writing because I can't stop, and won't you please help me? I finished by thrusting all of my journals into her hands and staggered towards the couch, the weight of having finally told someone, making my knees weak and shaky. "Oh, dear," she replied. "Your thoughts aren't just racing, they are lapping you." Then she proceeded quite gently and with a great deal of kindness to tell me that I did not have ADD. Rather, she thought I was most likely bipolar and currently smack dab in the middle of my first manic episode. And it would probably be a good idea for me to start taking some lithium. All I felt was an overwhelming sense of relief. To have a name for the monsters in my head after all these months. To know there was a way to kick them out too, just like I had Fred. Who knew it would feel so good to find out that you are, in fact, crazy? I started on lithium that week, including trips to the doctor every other day to get my blood tested to make sure that there wasn't too much lithium in my system. The raging whitewater river of thoughts crawled back into its banks, and I started feeling like I might not fall overboard at all. I stayed on lithium for about 7 months. I hated the regular blood testing, and the lithium was sort of like a dull gray blanket over everything. It was almost like having Fred back. But it was the pee that got me. Fun fact, lithium can impact your ability to control your bladder. When I started to smell of piss on a regular basis, I decided to take myself off of it. Having read over a dozen books on bipolar disorder while still in the throes of a full-blown mania, I knew that this would be universally recognized as a bad idea. I had a plan, though. I told 2 trusted friends to let me know if they started seeing some of the most obvious signs of mania returning. And I kept going to my shrink. I didn't actually tell her I was going off lithium, largely because I didn't want to hear a lecture, but also because I wanted to use her as a control group and see if she noticed any difference on her own, without looking for it. So I stopped taking my meds, and nothing happened. It's been over 6 years, and I haven't had another manic episode. Even though Fred still stops in from time to time. I have more mood swings than your average bear. Nothing like the mad rush of full-on mania. I have no idea why. Statistically speaking, I should need to be on medication for the rest of my life. But mental illness, much like the rest of the human condition, is a spectrum. Apparently, I fall closer to the middle of the spectrum, even if I am not really normal. But that's okay, because fuck normal. I was never very good at it anyway. At least I don't smell like pee anymore. Thank you.
October 2017. You get a phone call from your old landlord to haggle about getting the deposit back. Walking outside to pace, you don't notice that the door doesn't close all the way. You walk the block haggling, and when you return to the front of your new home, your new neighbors tell you that they saw your beagle get out. You begin to look around as you're haggling, but now that the dog is missing, your haggling sucks, and so you hastily agree to give your ex-slumlord more money than he deserved, screwing you and your about-to-be angry fiancé out of essentially a month's free rent at the new place. You then realize that the beagle has crawled underneath the house and is making absolutely no noise. Shaking the box of treats does nothing. Pretty soon, you can't even see her. You don't know if she fled from under the house while you were panicking. You fire off a series of texts to your fiancé about said panicking, and even though she's slammed at work, she calls to give you a couple of ideas on new tactics. You hang up with her, grab the whole chicken from the fridge you've been making meals out of all week, and place it on the front porch to begin luring the beagle out. You go back into the apartment to grab your laptop, because you may as well get some work done while you're waiting for the beagle to smell the chicken and come looking. When you get back out with your computer, you see another man walking his 3 dogs, 2 chihuahuas and an English bulldog. They're in a Mexican standoff with your beagle, who is defiantly blocking the sidewalk with a large piece of cheesy bread in her mouth. Where the hell did she get the cheesy bread? You run toward her. Even though she knows the jig is up, she tries to make a run for it. She drops the cheesy bread to lighten the load and maybe trip you up, but since you're about 7 times her size, this doesn't even slow you down. She hungers next to the curb and braces for impact. You grab her collar so she won't run any further and scoop her up in your arms to take her inside. You have a quick chat with a nice man walking his dogs, and he keeps talking about how adorable and innocent the beagle is. Clearly, he was not paying attention. You go inside, shut the door, and your beagle lies down in her blanket with a huge smile on her face. You pour yourself a whiskey and try to remember what your day's plans used to be. January 2018. It's the first nice day after the freakish freezing weather has passed. You're out running errands while your fiancée is at home taking care of a few chores and catching up on some crafting projects she's had her eye on. Since the day is nice, she's in and out crafting on the front porch. In one of these moments, the beagle decides that now is her time and bolts past her fiancé and out the front door. Immediately, the chase is on. Your fiancé is fast, but the beagle is on a mission. Thankfully, as fast as the beagle can be at times, her nose will always get the best of her. 2 blocks down, the beagle comes to a spot in the road that is littered with breadcrumbs. It looks like someone decided to crumple a whole bag of garlic bread to leave in a line for passing birds. The beagle zeroes in on the bread product and starts going to town, vacuuming up as much as she can because she knows that time is limited. On the driveway of the house that the bread is in front of, a little Maltese is watching the beagle with a look of bewildered disgust. As your fiancé runs toward the beagle, the Maltese looks at her and begins yapping as if to say, "Excuse me, ma'am, but can you please see to this ruffian?" The beagle doesn't even care that she's about to get caught. She is going to chomp as much sweet gluten goodness as she can before being picked up and taken back inside. This leaves both you and your fiancé to marvel at the beagle's talents for food discovery. No matter where it is or what state it's in, her nose can find food. One time, while you were on vacation at the Frio River, the beagle ate an entire loaf of wheat bread that someone ignorantly left in a low place. Another time, she snuck up on you while you were drunkenly eating Whataburger and pilfered 5 French fries from your plate. Your fiancé told you that once, years before you met, the beagle leapt from a chair and stole a piece of pizza from a friend's hand. One Christmas, the beagle figured out how to get a whole ham out of the refrigerator. She even figured out how to disable the child cabinet locks to access the trash can. Where food is concerned, the beagle is a damn super spy. February 2018. You have a house guest. She's a friend and a colleague of your fiancé in town for a show. And while your fiancé is at work, you end up hanging out. You discuss the local art scene, the foibles of making a living as an artist in Houston, which music you like, and all the other things people discuss. Eventually, you tell the story of the October escape. You admit to your fiancé's colleague that although the beagle is a pain in the ass, she's your favorite of the 2 dogs that your fiancé has brought into your life. You had cats all growing up, and into your adult life too. As a result, you prefer pets that are not quite domesticated, that are unpredictable, and quite possibly insane. You love the other dog, don't get me wrong, but you get an incredible amount of joy from the chaos that an animal like the beagle brings into your household. You respect it. Your house guest goes out to meet some friends of hers, and you return to what you were doing. Your fiancé comes home from work, you begin your routine of making dinner, watching TV while snuggling on the couch, and then separate to work on your individual projects. Your fiancé decides to do a bit of laundry, heads out back to put a load in the apartment washer. Neither of you notice that the beagle slips out the door while your fiancé isn't looking. Meanwhile, your house guest and a friend are sitting in their car in the front of your house, having final conversations and saying goodnight. As they're talking, your house guest glances up and sees the beagle booking it down the street at top speed. Without saying anything, your house guest jumps out of the car and starts running after her. All the while, you're putting some clothes away while your fiancé is seated on the couch working on her computer. You hear a knock on the door. You open the door to find your house guest, a look of utter disbelief on her face, holding the beagle in her arms, the beagle holding a bagel. Where does she keep finding this bread? Your house guest tells you that the beagle growled when she tried to take the bagel away, so she assumed that it must have been hers. After your fiancé assures her that the beagle did not own the bagel, the house guest looks directly at you in disbelief and says, "She's a fucking cat."
I'm so tired of working in the nighttime with the slow business and the gas prices up to $3.95 a gallon everywhere. Yuck. Yeesh. Ugh. Tonight, I made money only because I picked up that guy again, the Burger King Bandit. For a few months, I'd regularly pick up a guy from the Cinnamon Ridge apartment complex. He worked at the Burger King and needed a cab every day. He always went back and forth to work in the cab and never said anything. Then one night, he took the cab to Burger King at 2 a.m. The place was closed, but he had a key. He came out with a lot of money. I pretended like I didn't know what was going on. We then went to a corner of the city where I knew he was going to buy crack because everyone buys crack there and it's common knowledge. I thought, hoped I'd never see him again. I saw him again tonight. Tonight, I picked up the Burger King Bandit at the Executive Inn. I don't remember his name. I don't know he'd be the one to come out that hotel room. When you're cab driving, you never know who's gonna come out of a hotel. I should have refused to drive him anywhere. I knew what was happening. I wound up driving him around 4 different places in the city to try to score crack. Each one successively more scary by order of magnitude. Firefly Street behind the Packet Bar. And then that apartment near Telephone and 45. And then that closed down convenience store near Scott Street and 45. Which is where we found the crack lady who got in the car and directed us to this dark alley full of drug dealers and gang members a few blocks away. All of them just roaming around in the pitch dark neighborhood at 3 a.m. My guy in the car had to break off a piece to the crack lady for her service in finding him the crack. After that, we let her out the gas station near the feeder ramp. Tonight, he told me all about his history with drug abuse, and his stints in prison, and his children, and his problems after college. He's got a degree in applied mathematics, 3 assault charges, a burglary charge, 5 marijuana possession charges, a soliciting charge, and another misdemeanor offense for dialing 911 and not saying anything. And he robbed a Burger King in front of me the last time I picked him up and drove him around looking for crack. He said that night, 2 weeks ago, he'd fought with the mother of his 3-month-old daughter and smashed a cell phone over her head. He broke it apart on her head with the force of his hand. The police are probably after him for that one too. He's been smoking crack for only a year. Thank you.
Ooh, thank you for not being freakishly tall, Paul. This is perfect. Okay. I've been a performer in one capacity or another for 20 plus years, and certainly had my shares of ups and downs. I've had good shows, bad shows, what the fuck happened here kind of shows. But whatever the outcome, it was always dictated by me. Very rarely have I played for an audience who heckled or tried to interact with me on stage without being prompted. It was only recently I experienced the worst audience ever. I'm always happy to play, and if you're going to pay me for it, well, that's even better. When I do cover shows, all I play is old rock and roll, classic country, some assorted punk songs, and a few originals for good measure, so it stays fun for me. The people who are at these shows are at the bar to have fun anyway, so even if they're less than thrilled with my song selection, they still go with the flow. This wasn't the case, however, at a very recent cover show I played. I was hired by a local brewery to play on a Saturday afternoon from noon to 4 while their bar was open. I set up on the small stage outside with my acoustic guitar running through a small amp and the vocal volume low and complimentary. Nothing fancy, nothing too loud. This was the 7th time I'd played the brewery, and all the other times I had my drummer with me. The staff liked us and kept having us back, but we were always a tough sell to the patrons who did not hesitate to lodge complaints against us. We were too loud, we were too fast, we were too aggressive sounding, and we were too loud again. Despite the uphill battle we faced, we just kept coming back for more. In front of me were several tables with benches filling the space beneath a tin roof, providing little respite from the Texas heat. I'd already played one set and was a few songs into the second when an older couple sitting in front started talking loudly whilst gesturing toward the stage. "Hey, play a love song." I was taken aback at first by his odd request, and I played it off by saying, "Aren't they all love songs?" He vehemently disagreed and proceeded to shout for me to play something pretty. He went on to flatter me by saying I had talent, but no one liked what I was doing. No one? I guess this guy had assumed the position of mouthpiece for the rest of the patrons seated around him. I looked from him to the woman who wore a hateful glare I thought might turn me to stone. I could see I wasn't going to get anywhere with her. When I finished the set, I approached the table. "Hey, what the hell is going on over here?" I asked. The man again launched into a patronizing monologue saying I needed to play pretty love songs because no one wanted to hear what I was doing. There was that no one again. "You need to know your audience, son," he said. "We are your audience and we aren't happy. So what are you going to do about it?" "You're very angry," the woman suddenly piped up. "You sound so angry up there. Everything you play sounds angry." "Well, I like to think I'm passionate," I quipped, flashing a smile. The woman resumed her glare of doom while slowly shaking her head. I was frustrated, and I told them I was sorry they weren't enjoying it, but I was being paid to play the songs I was playing, and that was that. The couple, and these were adults, mind you, then mockingly told me to follow the money because that's what was important. Through clenched teeth, I told them it was about being happy and having fun, but when you're trying to do something to pay your bills, then of course money is involved. The man asked me if he paid me $20, would I play something they liked? After some back and forth, I told them I would open the next set with Patsy Cline's "She's Got You." They were delighted at this agreement. A couple friends and I went to the parking lot to smoke a joint, where I told them I had no intention of doing what these people wanted. More than that, though, I wanted to show them you can't come to a show and begin to dictate to the person performing what you want them to do. I started the next set by saying, "I've been made aware some people aren't happy with what I'm playing today. So this next song goes out to the couple in the front here who thought they could make art their bitch for $20. I proceeded to play the song excruciatingly slow while staring them down and asking, "Are you happy now?" between each line of the song until they got up, chastising me with dismissive waves and chiding comments. They promptly went inside to complain, and then came back out to leave as I told them goodbye over and over again from the stage while they walked to their car. Satisfied, I settled myself down and continued the set. Feeling confident the worst was behind me, I got about halfway through before another issue arose. A man crossed in front of the stage mid-song and paused. He looked directly at me and very loudly said, "Fuck you, you suck." A wide-eyed young boy was tightly holding this man's hand as they continued on their way. I stopped the song. "I'm sorry," I said into the mic. "What was that?" "I said, fuck you, you suck." "Oh, okay," I continued. "Yeah, I appreciate the feedback. Hey, is that your son with you? I just want to ask because you're setting such a stellar example for him." The man gritted his teeth and took a step toward the stage. "I'll kick your fucking ass," he bellowed. "Okay," I said, still speaking into the mic. Half a moment of tension I was too keyed up to perceive passed between this fine father and myself, resulting in him turning around to leave after telling me to go fuck myself. That's what I thought, you fucking poser. Granted, that wasn't the best declaration of victory, but there was something about calling this guy a poser in front of other people that got my dick hard. This was about the time one of the owners ran out from the bar area in a panic with his head on a swivel yelling for me to stop saying fuck. I apologized, doing my best to explain how the scene had deteriorated into utter chaos. I'm not sure it was registering entirely. "Do you want me to stop?" I asked him. "Do you think you should stop?" "I think I should finish the show I came here to play." My tone said there would be no challenging this decision. He nodded and went back inside, where he no doubt had to immediately field a multitude of complaints. I don't know why I wanted to finish the set. I just did. I felt if I didn't, then the terrorists win or something like that. When I was done, I hastily packed up my stuff before the last note I played had fully decayed. I collected my payment and apologized to the owner and staff, not for what I did, but because they had to deal with all the people I pissed off. I stewed in my own juices the entire long trip home, but I was ready to put the whole thing behind me. At least I was until I arrived to find there were people from the audience tearing me apart in the comments for the Facebook page. They called me rude and disrespectful. They decried my unwillingness to play to the audience and added several other general but equally barbed aspersions. The comment that bothered me the most read, "I guess you don't realize that when you're a musician and you're in the service industry, honey." I couldn't wrap my mind around how this person could equate the two things. Spending hours a day for years practicing a craft to the point you're able to write your own compositions and then perform them is just simply not the same as "would you like fries with that?" I replied to two of the comments before catching myself sinking to the level of fruitless Facebook fighting, so I disengaged. But for the rest of the day, my anxiety shot up every time my phone received a notification. I was angry after the incident, but a few days later, I went out of town, my focus shifted, and I was fine. A day after I got back, I received a message from the brewery. They apologized for the rough time I'd had when I played last, and assured me they would advertise better the next time I play, so people knew what to expect. The message ended with a list of upcoming dates, all of which I could have depending on my availability. The next time? I wasn't sure I wanted there to be a next time, and I didn't know how I felt about the assumption. I couldn't imagine the majority of patrons would welcome me back with open arms, but aside from that, why would I want to put up with that kind of shit anyway? The drive was too far, and the pay was too low for me to eat shit and call it sherbet. I sat down and wrote back a message conveying that particular sentiment, but worded in a very polite and well-structured way. Now, don't get me wrong, my first thoughts went right to that of a revenge plot in which I return, and in tow would be a huge collection of scummy punks and ne'er-do-wells, all who've been drinking since 8 a.m., and all who intend to keep drinking and take over the bar completely. There were other nuances to the plan, but that's the basic outline. Maybe I could have handled the situation better, but that could be said about any situation. Plus, it was a little late for could'ves. Either way, I don't regret it. All I ask is that next time you're at a show you don't like, just leave. Go home and express your distaste online like everyone else. Also, if you're at a show and think you have something clever to add to the performance, just remember that you really don't. So keep your fucking mouth shut. Go home and tell everyone online just how clever you are, just like everyone else. Thank you.